Cass's lecture tonight marks the first of our lectures for the spring semester, so we're very excited to have him here to help us kick off the lecture series this semester. I'm going to read just a very quick bio to give you a little bit of background on Cass, and then I'll let him get started. So Cass Calder Smith established the architectural firm that bears his name in 1990 here in San Francisco, and he has since expanded it to New York. He was born in 1961. He earned his bachelor and master's of architecture from the University of California at Berkeley. He's a native of New York City, but he's lived in California since 1972. So this kind of bi-coastal lifestyle is something that's been consistent for him for his whole life so far. He splits his time between both coasts, and he is the son of an Academy Award-winning filmmaker and a California landscape painter and designer. His early years were influenced by both Greenwich Village intellectuals and rural California artisans. Normally, I don't give such a detailed background on lectures, but it's really interesting in Cass's case because he has this mixed background that really influences the way that he works. He's recognized internationally for his architectural and interior design projects. He draws inspiration from history's great architects and relies on a cinematographer's way of articulating space, a carpenter's attention to detail, and an experienced designer's affinity for bold imagery and unexpected choices. So that background really is something that has come through in his work. He's won numerous awards, and he's been recognized in the New York Times, Architectural Record, Metropolitan Home, Metropolis, Dwell, Interior Design, and Abitare, among many others. So please help me in welcoming Cass to the stage.
Thank you. I'll try to live up to that long description. Yeah, you know, I forgot that I think, I mean, not that I forgot, but I do forget a little bit that I grew up in New York and lived out here and back and forth and have all these diverse influences. But it does influence the work in some way. I don't know how. Maybe I'll be able to explain that as I go through what I'm going to show you. But I think I try to just bring my experiences to my project and think about it from a perspective of whether people are from different parts in the world, different places, and always really from an experience standpoint, probably, than from a sort of an academic, descriptive standpoint. So hopefully you'll see that throughout. As she said, I spend about half my time in California and the other half in New York City. I have my office out here has about 15 people, and the one in New York has about 5. I kind of split my time like 2 weeks, and sometimes 3, 1, 3, stuff like that. And it's pretty good. As you may know, I design a lot of restaurants, and I started doing that from California and San Francisco, which is, to me, still the greatest restaurant city around, and New York's really great too, but it's nothing like San Francisco. So that's another connection that I've found that's rooted a lot of the work that I do, and I feel pretty fortunate that started out here in California. I'm not sure that kind of rooting effect would have happened anywhere else, maybe in Europe or something, but the way the food and beverage world of Northern California is so connected to lifestyle and design and architecture is really helped that out and made my career really fun in that way. And also I'm just really into food, so that's been nice. So what I'm going to show tonight is the way we tend to describe our projects. Let me open this up. Yeah, it's working. Okay. So let me pull this over here a little bit. Here. Okay, so what I've been doing in my office over the years is trying to always stay as diverse as possible, even though we've designed a lot of restaurants and that's what people know us for and seek us out. We've still designed a lot of homes and a lot of other types of commercial buildings. So we call the practice, the work, eat, live, work. It's on there somewhere. Let me see if I can get this mouse to work. Hold on. This will help at some point. So anyhow, obviously the restaurants are eat, live, or houses, and work is work. And everybody in my office just works on all types of projects. There's a little bit of specialty towards one or the other amongst teams, but not really in any significant way. The other thing is my firm is mostly architects. There's about 10 of us who are full-on architects with master's degrees in various things. There's 3 people that are full-on interior designers, and then there's a few interns and a couple of admin and marketing people. But we don't do it in a way where it's departmental. We team up from the beginning to the end of a project and take it through as a team, and everybody has different responsibilities, so it isn't like architects are wearing the hats of interiors people, but it's still a very integrated process that there's a lot of debate, and sometimes it's the architects winning out, sometimes it's the interiors, but generally it's a collective thing that's all about what the project is. And what also happens as well is I'll find that some projects do get led more from an interior design direction, like they might be more about style and others might be more about structure. It's probably a simplified way to describe that. But I sit back and in a way kind of pull the levers when I'm working with my team to sometimes skew projects to go one way or another. And some projects we do are really just one or the other. Every now and then we'll do a core and shell rehabilitation for a commercial building, and that will be it. We won't be picking any finishes. We won't be doing anything related to lighting, and it'll just be straight up architecture. And some other projects, somebody might hire us just to do all the furniture for a house, or just to interior a restaurant or something. So some projects are that way, but that's really not the norm. Most it's people coming to us for a full project from beginning to end. And that's what people, I think, have liked about it over the years, is that we do both. And I think the way the industry has moved has allowed a lot of architects and interior designers to just not describe which one they're doing. They're just doing projects, and we're all thankful to have the work usually as well. But I think we've all been able to figure out how to make what typically would be called interiors projects much more architectural, and I also think that many architectural projects have gotten much more detail oriented and much more about style and time and fashion and things like that. That has also rounded that out. So that's just kind of randomly the way we've been approaching these things. So getting into EAT, the first project I ever designed that was a restaurant was Restaurant Lulu, and it's going to be 20 years old at the end of this year, which seems like amazing. I remember when we were joking about how if the restaurant lasted 5 years, that would be so cool, and how successful that would have been, and all these like little stories we used to think about that now I look back on 5 years. I mean, that went by super quick anyhow, but a restaurant approaching 20 years is just still seems kind of unheard of. But I have learned that when you do things, not just my firm, when we do things well, but when people just do things pretty well, design them to be as timeless as you can, approach them with like the right amount of budget and the right people, the right locations and the right ideas, they usually do last a long time. It's a good lesson. You learn all kinds of things. But when I did Lulu, I was a grad student at Berkeley. I was finishing up my last year there, and one of my roommates was a chef, and him and I both got introduced to this woman who owned a building south of Market and said, "Can you guys create a restaurant for me?" And of course we said yes, and of course we assumed she would disappear just about as fast as we asked her for money and a contract, but she was for real. It was pretty surprising. And since then, she's been a multiple. We've done a lot of work together with her, and she's kind of like family now. So on the left is what we had. It was an abandoned warehouse. In 1989, earthquake had ravaged the area, and on the right is what we created. And I don't know if anybody's around back in '93 when it opened, but it was so extremely crazy and hot in that restaurant then. I mean, it was like, I've never seen anything like that since in San Francisco. It takes 3 or 4 months to get a table, and if you got one, they still wouldn't give it to you, and they didn't care. I mean, it was a great place, but they were gnarly, and everybody loved it and hated it, and Bill Clinton was eating. I mean, it was crazy. And I ended up in the middle of it. I mean, I was pretty happy, but all my friends were calling me, "Oh, can you get me a table there?" I'm like, no, I am not trying to do anything for anybody. It's just just a pothole if you guys try to come to me. So anyhow, back to the design. What I had done is I had been in some large restaurants before, and I was really afraid of how big they could get. And it was fun to think about it because it had this huge warehouse, and as an architect, I wanted to have dramatic space, but I had been to restaurants a lot. I've always been into going out and eating, and I'd seen big ones feel not so good. And so I was worried that this kind of too much volume wouldn't add up to the right kind of restaurant. But I still wanted it dramatic, and they wanted to do an Italian restaurant, and I didn't want to do anything thematic like you find in North Beach. So what I thought about was how to put a piazza inside of a restaurant, inside of a warehouse, which is, oh God, sorry, that mouse doesn't really work. I'm not going to worry about it. But on the right, lower right, that's the Piazza del Campidoglio in Rome. And I basically created the shape of the inside of the warehouse in that. And what Michelangelo did when he designed that is the upper part of that piazza drawing is the Senatorio, which is what those two buildings splayed apart help you see more closely. There's a reverse of perspective. It's foreshortening. And so I did the same thing with the open kitchen and the plan for Lulu. I built these buildings inside. And so I was playing like building buildings inside of a building. I was creating a piazza. And to me, I was like, if I can bring this place to life like a piazza with that amount of energy and liveliness, then I wasn't worried about, well, is this like too big of a dining room or anything like that. I was just going to transcend it all. So, and I wasn't like in my mind going, okay, I need a concept and how do I support that? I was just really thinking about it from a more visceral level, from experience, really. And then this is what it is, and you can tell it was very big in there, but it worked. You know, it doesn't feel too big. You know, the finishes, I'm not sure I would do everything the same today, and I would certainly remodel it today in many ways, but in general, it came together and it felt like a piazza at night. And it wasn't like a fake version. People, you know, weren't in like some cliched version of a movie or anything like that. So that was the genesis of Lulu. Here's the shot on the right looking straight in. And, you know, they wanted a large fire. And they didn't really have a huge program either. Restaurateurs are a little bit notorious for not having much of a program or for taking notes or for paying you. There's a lot of things they don't do. But they were just kind of like, we want a cool place and we want an open kitchen and a lot of fire. And so then it was just up to me. And I didn't know how much a restaurant client would tell me what or what not to do. I designed a lot of residential work, but I'd never designed a commercial project nor a restaurant project. I just had my own opinions because I had been out eating quite a bit. And so you can see we built everything was new, but not radically in contrast to anything else. It was kind of sympathetic to it, but I still wanted a distinction between what I put in there and what was there. And I've played with that more and more, and as I think you guys all know as designers, you know, contrast is always a designer's best friend, and how much you push it or don't is pretty useful depending on what you're trying to do. The middle area there is like the piazza, and it's sunk, and the way I did it is you come up from the sidewalk about 10 inches, you come in the door, and then you go down. So I kind of set this whole procession up. After I did Lulu, I thought about not only are we doing like eat, live, work, but what kind of projects are they if you tried to subcategorize them a little bit? And what I realized with Lulu is it was kind of an epic. It's big. A lot of people go there. It's got like a huge footprint on its world around it for what it is. And I was like, that's like an epic. That's like the movie Lawrence of Arabia or the Rolling Stones or the Titanic or the Met in New York. And then there's indies, which is a little bit like the smaller projects we do, small restaurants and some of the residential work. And they have everything, you know, like in movies, they kind of have their own particular characteristics that I think apply across culture, not just like movies and architecture. But if you think about like what really makes an epic, and what I think I learned about doing with Lulu and I've continued to use, is that an epic is a combination of usually some large idea, like if you think of Dr. Zhivago or Lawrence of Arabia, which are these David Lean movies, he picked a huge place in history and decided to make a movie. So he's got the big covered, but instead of it just being all big and and dramatic, he's also got really fine acting and really beautiful little tight shots. So your experience is from very small to very big. And I think to get an epic, whether it's the Rolling Stones, who can play, you know, when Ronnie's playing like slide guitar really beautifully on a little song, to Jumping Jack Flash being really big, or the movie like I told you about, or even if you look at fine art, I think you'll see this range. When you see the range, it's usually a very successful result. So that's what I took away from Lulu. But since many projects, you can't get the big idea, some are not going to have it. And so to me, those are more like French films, indie films, and smaller things, which I think still are just as valid, but you don't want to try to make something that maybe should stay small and make it big. You should figure out how to make it more about its little story and its details rather than trying to blow it out of its own potential proportion. So that's why we have indies, and, you know, examples of that are like Woody Allen movies and, you know, Little Oyster Bars, and Neil Young. In a way, I think you could argue whether he's epic or indie, but in a way, I think everybody understands him more as like an indie musician. So, so if you follow that line of thinking, I can take you through the work a little bit as we see it that way. So here's another project which I did. This was many years after doing Lulu, but this is called RM Seafood, and it's in Mandalay Bay. We started doing work in Las Vegas. Well, yeah, I should back up a little bit. As soon as Lulu was done, all of a sudden, I was a restaurant architect. They were just like, okay, you're a restaurant architect. Those are, you know, people assumed I'd been designing them for a long time. Of course, I obliged and started getting hired to do projects, not just in San Francisco, but all over the place. People also came to me and said, God, that's such a cool restaurant. Can you make a house look like that? Yeah, sure, pay me. Can you do a, you know, my office with a fireplace like that? Yeah, sure. And it was amazing. It was a good lesson too, and I remember, this is something to like keep track of. I remember there was a lot of really tough points on that project. You know, at a certain point, the owner, even though she was cool, she wanted to pay me less for something, and you know, there was some other difficulties like all projects have, and you know, you get to those points and you go, God, you know, I just want to like say what I wanted to say and run out of here. And I was like, don't do that. This is important. This project is big. Make sure it's built and people see it. And in fact, go way above the call of duty. This is an opportunity. You know, you should stay here 12 hours a day for the last month. Don't even leave. Make sure the contractors do everything right, even though you're not getting paid for it. And I really did. And in the end, I was like, I'm glad I did what I should have done, or maybe what I probably shouldn't have done. But it was good. So you don't have too many chances. Take them when you can get them. So then Lulu, or RM comes along. This is in Vegas, and it's even bigger. Lulu was 8,000 feet, and this is 16,000 square feet. It's on 2 levels. It's essentially 2 restaurants. We ended up creating one upstairs and one downstairs. In Vegas, you have to be kind of dramatic. And actually, for Vegas, this isn't even dramatic. You know, this is actually kind of boring for there. But we did try to create a restaurant there that had kind of a timeless feel and also felt like it was a seafood restaurant in some way. And you know, it's been there for 7 years, and it's pretty successful and pretty popular still. And it's never been like a flash in the pan, high-end popular like some of the other places. But I look at it now and I go, you know, Rick's still going and he's doing well. He does better all the time, actually. He's never been like huge. He's just been slightly getting more and more business over the years. And you know, it's kind of one of those lessons where you bring architectural and interior thinking all together. You solve spaces. You think about finishes. You think about how to be timeless, and you try to do something that represents who your client is, in this case a seafood chef, and you get there. And so that's what happened in this place. On the right is the upper floor plan. On the left is the lower floor plan, and the green in both of these is the kitchen, and what in restaurant design you call back of house, which is, you'll see sometimes BOH and FOH for front or back of house. This is a monster, and this restaurant has to be able to do full buyouts. It has to do partial buyouts. You've got VIPs that come in the back door during conventions or after rock star events. It's got Super Bowl parties. It's not just like the everyday restaurant. And we had consultants that worked with us from Las Vegas to help us make sure that was done right. You can see, you know, and here we weren't trying to do anything really super radical. We were just doing what we felt would be good with Rick. Clean, good architecture, good space, nice finishes, a little bit glitzy, but not too much. And you know, and again, from an experience standpoint, what you find in Vegas, I don't know how much time people have spent there. You know, it's not my favorite place at all, but when you're out and about, it's very loud aesthetically and visually. You know, there's a lot to see, and it is actually sort of audio loud. And when I went there and I really looked around and tried out all the restaurants, I was pleased to go into a really calm one and have a really good meal, because you could just kind of escape from the din. Even though you like the din, it was a nice counterpoint to it. And that helped us on this one a lot, because everybody's coming up to you when you're designing these and goes, wow, where's it going to be crazy? What are the bathrooms going to do? And it's like, no, it's got to be a respite from everything. This is the upstairs part where it gets more high-end. The other thing you end up doing in these restaurant projects a lot too is there's a lot of brand thinking, which is something I think where architecture and interiors comes together really nicely, and it's like where commerce shoots right through it. And so all these chefs kind of have a brand of their own, but brand ties to levels of luxury and lifestyle as well, and you really have to start thinking about that a lot, and we do it quite a bit in projects like this. So the upper part has a much more luxurious brand, it's much more Cartier or something, and then downstairs is much more Banana Republic, maybe a little above Banana. So another epic is Lamar, which is only a couple of years old. We did in Pier 1.5. And again, this is a monster. It's 11,000 square feet of indoor and outdoor space on the waterfront. It seats 300 plus people. It's complicated because it's spread out all the way from the lower right up to the water there. It starts with the bar, which is that light green area. Then there's a breezeway, which is the ceviche bar, and then the gray is the main dining with the blue next to it, and then to the outside dining up above. And we had to stitch this together. This is a good example of one of the things about restaurants that's so cool in a way is you really have to be a really good problem solver. You have to be kind of sick about it. You have to really love solving unaesthetic, down and dirty problems about, you know, how to corral people, where to put them, how are wait stations going to go, how to flow. It takes a while. You know, you got to design restaurants for a few years before you can, I think, fluently do that. But at the same time, the place has to be cool and has to have impact, and people have to look good and feel good. And trying to do all that at once is a lot harder than people think. And restaurants, I think, are the most extreme version of that. I've designed retail and this and that, and I just think restaurants put it all really close together. And on top of that, you've got food and beverage. F&B is what we call it. So you've got things that are, you know, being carried across rooms, and you've got things that can't get sneezed on, and you've got storage, and you've got liquids. So there's like these levels of function that are intense, yet think about the aesthetic expectations that these places have as well. So it's pretty demanding, and I like that. I have a lot of people that come to work for me, whether they're interior designers or architects, that are really good, but they haven't designed restaurants. I'm like, so have you done that kind of work? They're like, no, but, you know, and I'm like, okay, cool, you know. And then we get into a project, and I see their learning curve. They're just like, whoa, this is, they think, it's an interior, it's a restaurant, how hard can it be? And then they see that the complexity of coordinating mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and colors, and everything at once is pretty intense. So you can see in this project, the lower left is the ceviche bar, which we put in a breezeway between two historic buildings. And we enclosed both ends. That's actually, and it's currently still a public walkway. Those doors have to be open at 8 in the morning and I think until 10 at night, and they have signs on them that say this is still a public walkway. So it's a little bizarre. You actually have a quasi-public restaurant. And I really see restaurants as public settings anyhow, especially in San Francisco. I mean, where do people go hang out? They kind of go to the parks and maybe the streets, but they go to the restaurants, they pay to be there, but that is probably the closest thing to a public setting that we have here. But then the upper left is the bar, the drinking bar. So there's a drinking bar, a ceviche bar. To the right is also part of the ceviche bar. And then you go into the main room, which is the main dining room, and then that leads out to the water. This building, which, you know, all these ones on the waterfront, as everybody probably knows, are part of this, you know, the port of San Francisco leasing these out to private developers, and they're all different buildings. You know, like we worked on the ferry building, we worked on this is Pier 1.5, then we did Pier 3, and they're all a little bit unique. This one, and they're all extremely protected historically. This one happens to be what was a small ferry terminal for if you were going to take a boat to the Delta, rather than an international boat or a boat just across the bay, you would catch your boat in this very terminal. It was the Delta terminal. So you can see this one's kind of decorative inside, whereas some of the other ones are purely warehouses. And actually, most of the pier head buildings are just warehouses, but this one was a little bit decorative. So here we were playing that counterpoint of this brand of this Peruvian restaurant against kind of this white, clean, existing, historic. And actually, the brand for this is not the first Lamar restaurant ever. They had 3 of these already, 1 in Lima and 2 in Mexico City, and so this was their first U.S. one. But the colors and the look, they had pre-established somewhat in their first restaurants, and then when I was hired, they said, look, we've got some stuff figured out, learn about it, and see how you would want to use it, but you're in your own city and you're your own architect, do what you think is good. And what they had was nice, and we worked it together pretty well and had fun with it. Here it is, it goes all the way to the back, right onto the water. I mean, I remember when I toured the premises, they were like, so what do you think, can you do a restaurant? I was like, oh, yeah. Getting a chance to design a 11,000-foot restaurant right on San Francisco Bay was quite a treat. But it really, aside from some of the outdoor seating, it really was, back up, it was very interiors oriented. We couldn't do much to this core and shell. But you can see where we did the lighting up above. There's these wooden beams with the lights attached, and then there's everything inside. So now here's another epic, because we're now starting to do projects internationally. This is in South Africa, in Johannesburg. There's a part of the city there called Sandton City, and this is a hotel called the Sandton Sun. And it's kind of like a Hyatt. It's an atrium hotel. And all this brassy stuff up above, that's not us, but that was there. And that style continued all the way down into the lower areas. And it was a couple of really weak bars and restaurants that were 30 years old and nobody went to. And so on the right, wish I could get, okay, yeah, here I am. So we did basically everything in here and out here, and it was, this is about 15,000 square feet, where basically it's the whole public lobby and a restaurant here, a bar here, and a little cafe here, and then an outdoor dining area for all of it out here. So this was fun because we had, like, from a spatial standpoint, this harkens back to Lulu a little, I mean, I had a 30-story atrium here that I wanted people to be able to eat in and feel like they were in a decent place, so there was some intimacy. But I didn't want to lose the drama of 30 stories. It's cool to look up. So we built this grid that's about 12 feet above the floor, and it's a big grid. It's about a 20-foot, maybe 20 by 10-foot snap on it, and it's got lights and fans and various things that hang from it. But in the end, it really worked. It creates a canopy. It's just enough. It's hard. You don't know if you're going to create too much or too little, but I guess we got lucky. And you feel like you're in a place, but when you sit back and you look up, you see it and you can sense it. And then everything within that area, which you can see from these color or these black and white photos down, is all ours and all new. We tried to be as regional as possible. We tried to bring in, as many kind of natural products and materials. There's fire, there's stone, there's real plants. This is a photographic surround that a local photographer created of all South African images of people and places, and they're printed on aluminum. This is just glued on this white stone wall, and we wanted to, these are like these budget things. We wanted to take it up to here, but that was an extra gazillion, whatever the money's called there, I forgot. But it was probably about $10,000, so we ended up with half of the height. Here's some more of it, indoor, outdoor. And we've since, before this and since, we've been doing a lot of hotel restaurants for Hyatt usually. And the reason we got hired is a friend of mine was working on this as a consultant, and he knew I'd been working in other Hyatts that had atriums. And he was like, you're one of those guys that knows how to handle an atrium. I'm going to bring you to South Africa for these guys. So I got to do that, and it was a good process. It was fun to go down there. Got to learn things about it. Traveled around the country, went on the safaris, did the whole thing. You can see up on the upper right, there's a little. You can kind of get a sense of seeing underneath this canopy, but you're still seeing some of the polished brass stuff up there that we weren't able to change. You know, in another phase, maybe they'll change that. The lower right, outdoor, big indoor-outdoor place. This is up on a hill, so you have sort of skyline views out over the city. And then this has a smaller restaurant within it, as I showed you in that floor plan. When you do hotel restaurants in big hotels, you usually have to have 2 restaurants. You have to have one they call an all-day one. Sometimes they call them 3 meals, and that one serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and usually has to be somewhat generic from a food standpoint. It doesn't have to be boring, but it's got to be able to, you know, feed people throughout the day and look and feel right through all those meal periods. And then but you always need something that's more higher end and is a nighttime destination. So we created this wine bar steakhouse restaurant called Vin, and that's what this is. But that's always fun because, again, you're kind of playing with, you know, you got your luxury scale and you're going, okay, let's get high on the luxury here and low on the luxury there, and then you deploy it. And you're kind of, you know, you create a counterpoint to the whole building, and then you're creating counterpoints amongst your venues. Now, a more recent epic is 25 Lusk here in San Francisco, and this was fun because in a way it kind of goes all the way back to Lulu. The owner bought a warehouse. It's south of Market. It's in an area that, well, this one's in an alley. The other one was on Folsom Street, but both were kind of considered like, what, how, why would somebody go way over there? And the owners were ready to basically spend as much money as they needed and had a lot of confidence in the team and their own ideas. So what we did at 25 Lusk is, again, we gutted a warehouse. This is probably the most classic example of doing architecture and interiors all at once. And I don't think a firm that only does one or the other could have done a project like this. It really would need either 2 teams or one firm that does both, because we replaced the foundations under this building. We did seismic upgrade. You can see the steel. We put in all new stairs, elevators, new roofs, and we did a restaurant all at the same time. And we did it all under, you know, one concept. One whole floor of the building isn't even a restaurant. It's office space that's up above. Anyhow, so my thinking for this was to create a splash down at the end of an alley. In South of Market, everything generally has to be a destination. There's not enough just like walk in there unless it's like a 50-seat restaurant. You have to create something either from a food or architecture, but probably both, that becomes a magnetic destination. And you got to work it hard. But what's tricky too, today in the whole restaurant world, which I think about, is the more you sort of try to create that splash up front, you are risking whether this place is going to be too fashionable and then somewhat short-lived. And I don't know where that line really is. I think, you know, most San Francisco restaurants, you can safely create good places and they're very timeless. But I hope this one lasts and looks good for a long time, but the demand here was like, you know, if we don't really get people down here, it's never going to go. And if it doesn't go, the whole thing's a waste. So let's just make it into that. So the thinking was, how do we create something that's really sexy and unique down at the end of an alley within an old building? And so the thought was, let's not do anything that's like what we have there now. Everything's brick, timber, concrete, dull, matte, dark, heavy. Let's do everything in opposite. So we kind of, our working term was the Gucci collection, the Gucci interior. So everything we did was white, shiny, chrome, stainless, reflective. And then also on a planning layout, instead of things being orthogonal, things would be angled and curved as well. So you can see how this plays out in this place. And then I'll come back to like what we did, but here's some of our early studies about reuse of buildings. This is kind of from an architectural standpoint. How to carve buildings up and reuse them. Trying to, you know, show images of unexpected. A lot of these are what we put together and show the clients. I'm showing you this project a little more as kind of a case study process, where the other ones are a little more summation. But then here's some of like what we were playing around with. You know, in the beginning, you don't even know what your architecture is going to be, but you can use imagery. So there's like, you're down an alley and what's down there, and then it's kind of intrigue. And then, you know, you can't build architecture quite like that. I think the architecture looks kind of boring comparing to the concepts, but I think it tells the story. And then a lot of sketching through different ways to create facades on this building. This is just kind of showing you a little bit about the way we work. Schematic plan sketches, different ones, different floors. And here's what we ended up with. So the one on the lower right is the main floor plan. You come up from the street, you go up into the space, which is here. There's the reception, the host. We've taken the floor out here and over here. So you're looking down in. The space was pretty wafer-like anyhow. These are these things where I think you really need to work hard to cut spaces and make double height spaces and, you know, create vertical versus horizontal. And anyhow, so this is main dining and a small bar. I have a big theory. If you really want a restaurant to feel like a restaurant, it's got to have a bar. So even though there's a big bar downstairs, there's a small bar on this floor. Kitchen with glass around it. Then you go downstairs and you end up with this lounge, large bar, and these fire orbs. So the general thinking from a functional standpoint is to create two places that are one. Downstairs is much more about partying. You don't make reservations. There's still food, but it's a different menu. It's a bar menu. And upstairs, it's a little more upscale, and you make reservations and hang out. Here's a model of what we built. Some of the SketchUp renderings as we went through it, and you know, you can start to see where we've, you know, here's cutting the floor away here, cutting this staircase through the walls, no floor here, fire orbs, facade coming together. Here's that passageway in. You know, it's nice to play with mystery and this and that if you know, go back and study Corbusier and his whole idea about the whole promenade and how you discover space as you move through it. There's a lot of that being deployed in this project. And while we're doing this, we're doing the finishes and the fixtures all the time. And then here it is being built. And then finished. And I think you can see everything that's new is not at all what's there. And the two just play off each other. Everything's angled, shiny, reflective, and everything existing is heavy and dark, pretty much. Something too, well, let me, you know, I'll go back to this one. You know, some of that epic to detail, you know, you zoom in here, you know, there's very carefully placed flush stainless steel screws through polished stainless steel metal, a table shooting out through a hole in the wall. You know, this could be an epic and none of this could be here, and it would probably be kind of the same project, but it's different. It's like, you know, I think you got to have that degree of detail even in public spaces that sometimes nobody wants to pay for. It's fun using polished stainless steel. That's what all this is. It's 1/4 inch thick plate polished to a mirror. It's expensive as hell, but it's really fun. I love it. I'm doing a facade in South Park now, and the whole building is going to be that. It's going to be like chrome until the birds kill it. We'll see. This is the ferry terminal. We did a variety of projects in here. We did Delica here, Lulu Petite here, and Tsar Nikolai here. I'm sure everybody knows the building. If not, get down there. And again, this is very brand driven. You know, this is, you know, I'm always being reminded that where commerce and architecture and design all come together. And this is for a Japanese salad company that wanted to have basically a restaurant in the ferry building to collect more ideas so that their salad company back in Japan could have more recipes and expand and grow more. Because their company back there is huge. They do $350 million a year in salad sales out of delis. They're huge. They're like, you know, one of the biggest fast casual companies in Japan. But they run out of recipes. They need more, and they need more ingredients. And so their idea was to, and they teamed up with Alice Waters at Chez Panisse, because she had designed a salad for them many years ago, which was hilarious because she specified what to grow, how to pick it, how to make it into a salad, how to prepare it, and how to sell it. And then they made a book like on that, and then they promoted the whole thing. And so they had this whole working relationship, and then when they wanted to do this, we did this with them. And mostly it's turned into just a place to make food and sell it. I don't think they have all these TVs. They were going to like go back and forth. I don't think it ever really happened. It was pretty funny. Then at the same time, we did Tsar Nikolai Caviar and Lulu Petite, and Lulu Petite was a small cafe for Restaurant Lulu many years later, which was a gourmet food product and a little cafe. So again, it's like brand. What do you do that's got brand impact and also from a design standpoint, you know, what does it really look like? You know, you look at like fast food and there's really strong brand impact, but it's usually hard to like. I think Chipotle does a good job. I think I can like their projects, but most fast food is impactful and tasteless. But so trying to get to these around the bend where you're getting both is fun. And also a lot of these people, like when we did Tsar Nikolai up here, they never even had a store. All they had done is sold caviar through websites and direct delivery to chefs. And the closest they had ever been to having a store like this was like when they go to those fancy food shows and they put it out on a table. So we took those people, they're very mom and pop, from that all the way to designing a store. And we started with imagery and brand and design, and then we ended up with, you know, essentially a caviar bar. Then this kind of leads to the indies, which is really what some of these other projects are. And to me, I kind of, you know, these are the places I like to go. I don't think I like to go to the epics that much. But, so, you know, indies are like neighborhood restaurants, and they're, I think it's great if they become destinations, and they kind of need some destination people driving to them, because it helps them be much more of a, you know, a robust business. But they're really about neighborhoods, and so they're the one we did in Cow Hollow. It's called Terzo, and they wanted a wine bar restaurant. We went traveling for 3 weeks. 8 of us went to Spain, Italy, and Portugal, and went to tapas bars, wine bars, and mostly kind of street food restaurants, and kind of just got that DNA into our system, and then thought about what would, you know, lower Pacific Heights, Cow Hollow, the marina like in a kind of a neighborhood restaurant, and came up with this look. And so it's kind of upscale European. It's somewhat timeless. It isn't like crazy fashionable in any way. Wine is the main, get this thing to work, is the main thing everywhere you look. It's in an old building, but we didn't play the contrast card up strong. That didn't seem to be needed. You come in, here's a wine bar, community table, main dining room. We added a room into the backyard here, which does special events. And yeah, here you can see, I mean, this is really kind of the main thing. And the menu is very driven also from everything we saw. And trying to get the food and the chef and the place to come together is something I like to work hard about too. You know, you think about, like, if there's one person you want to work with, the closest on a restaurant is the chef. And if, when it's done, you can leave and feel like you've created a place for the chef and his food, the people are probably going to really like that restaurant. It's going to feel authentic. So I'm always trying to make that happen. Here's the back room, little detail, like high-backed leather booths, banquettes, so you're a little more cozy. I don't know if you can see here, this is a detail we came up with. One thing that's always debated a lot in restaurants is tablecloths or no tablecloths. You don't really see them in California anymore. It's cheaper to not have them. Everybody wants wood anyhow. But it's, you know, it's super casual, and so for this place we figured, let's do them, but let's let them drop through slots so you still see a wood table, but you've got a little bit of fabric and warmth right there at the place. And these are the kind of projects where you can actually zoom in and do more details, because you're not playing with this big thing. You've got to really make them come together with a small story and a lot of details rather than the big end of it. Then here's one at the other end of the country, and maybe the scale too. This is a roadside barbecue in the Hamptons in Sagaponack, New York, right next to East Hampton. And this is like a roadside dive. My clients went to Texas and Kansas City and did their own research. These are their photos. And they were like enamored by it. I wish I had gotten to go. And then this was the building they bought. So actually, we probably should have not touched it and maybe just put a barbecue sign on it. It might have been more close to what it should have been, but that might not have worked. Anyhow, so the up part is a little bit of an early sketch. And they also would be smoking all their meats there in a large Texas-made meat smoking oven called the Oiler. It's this thing. It's like a van, but it's wood burning. So we felt like that was important to bring it into the fold too. So these are some sketches. This is us designing an interior that's like made out of plywood and everything carpentry built. And then as we went further, and this is the finished, we decided to make the whole place out of used barnwood, the outside and the inside. So, and then there's a little bit of plywood, like the seating we had built out of plywood, the booths and the tabletops are linoleum. You can see here's the tables, there's a little bit of steel. This is a big butcher block countertop from a company that just makes those, and this is all used wood, the whole place. It's countertop. This is just a terminology. When you buy your food at the counter, it's called fast casual. That's the term, not necessarily fast food, but fast casual. And most barbecue places are that way. A lot of, anything where you order there is that system. You can see, here's outside. We integrated wood logs into the way the fences are built, painted right on the outside, kind of like barns are. The owner was cool. He went and found these feed scooper things from the feed store and puts the sauces in them. And, you can just see all the wood coming together. This was pretty fun. Yeah, a little better version of the outside. This project has won a ton of awards. I mean, to me, this is like fun sketch. Don't work too hard. Just relax. Not get all crazy about everything. And you enter this in these design awards, and it just blows away the restaurants that are all fancy and fixed up. The jurors love these things. Then down the street from Lamar is Pier 3, which is where we built the plant. How are we doing for time? We're good. And this is in a rail split space, breezeway split, I guess. Here's the breezeway, here's one part of the restaurant, here's the other part. This was really weird to build a restaurant bridging this. You can see it right here. Functionally, it's actually, we made it work, but it wasn't such a smart thing for those guys to lease this building. So here's the kitchen. This has a cafe, takeout, and then this is the dining room with a bar, and there's a little bit of a pizza oven kind of size kitchen right here. So you can see that. And here, this is one of these buildings, again, that you can't really touch, but they're a warehouse-style pier building. This is not meant for anything but being a warehouse. So we put our things in here new. It doesn't really touch what's there. It's very, hands-off. And it's, in general, this one is all about these guys' food message. The first one we did for them is in the marina. It's called Lettuce Cafe Organic. They had to change the name because of some legal issues. So now they're all called The Plant, but it's still The Plant Cafe Organic. And they're into very organic. They're like 98% of the food is organic. They have meat, but they don't have any red meat. It's very, very sustainable. And they really wanted a modern interior and look and feel that supported their vision and their story. So this is our version of how to do that. Here's an early collection of some of the materials and finishes. Reclaimed cedar. There's a lot of recycled tile. There's various other things. I mean, we're not super dogmatic usually about the green. We do it on restaurants where we can, but we don't like to trump it in any way that is kind of overdoing it. What you can't see here, although I think it's in another photo, is we did put a photovoltaic solar system on the roof of this building that provides maybe about 20% of the electricity. Nobody really knows, but it provides a sub portion of the building's use. Indoor, outdoor. Of course, it's got the big plant. They picked that, and I was like, it's got to have a plant, right? He's like, yeah, we're going to pick a big one. Okay. It was fun. This is the pizza part. Here's the outside. Here's the inside. This, one of the things we end up deploying a lot in spaces that have a lot of people is acoustical absorption, because the sound in a restaurant can be really bad. So, like, this is a wood slat ceiling, but behind it is a black acoustical panel system that is pretty cheap. When you can't see it, you don't have to spend money. It's a little bit like these walls in here, and that absorbs sound pretty well. A couple things too. We also like to do things that are local. Like this is all tile from Heath over in Sausalito. We did as much outdoor seating as possible. Pretty simple collection of materials. Yeah, here's the solar panels. Flora Grubb created this air wall, or this plant wall, for them. Another little project, Barbaco, downtown, which is the little brother to Perbaco, and so this is like their little Enoteca wine bar version. And here they were like, let's make this very Italian, very kind of Milan. You reinterpret what that means, and so that's what we ended up doing here. It's very sporty, stripy. And it was tricky from a spatial standpoint, because from here back it's a low ceiling. It's about 7'10", and up in the front it's high. And so we built the ceiling like this so it wouldn't feel so blunt, like a high space and then a low one. We made it just flow. And then we did everything else we could to make the space as interesting as possible. But I just think, you know, even though I really work the finishes a lot, I really wrestle with these things spatially in the beginning. Whether they're too big, how do you make them smaller? If they're too small, how do you make them feel bigger? How do you make things connect together? And I think that's really, you know, that's the architect in me more than anything. We created the art. This is a collection of blurred digital photography that's been blurred and then mixed with mirrors. We designed all the floor tiles, all the tables. It's burl wood. The tables are all italic shaped too. You see this, even the two tops. So you're not quite looking across at your friend. It's kind of neat. This is a little more fashionable. We just created a pizza place in the Westfield Center called Cupola Pizzeria, and they really wanted something that tied into the fashion of the mall, the shopping and all that. So what we did, and you know, this might be a little more literal than it probably should have been, but we basically created a runway from the front to the pizza oven right here. But again, these are these ones, you know, if you don't do something like with some impact in the beginning, you're going to fade away. So that risk line is I'm trying to keep track of where it is. I think only time will tell. And you know, the other thing too is even if they're a little bit trendy, if their food is really good and their service works, I think these places will do well. And if they're a little trendy and then those guys fall off, they're dead. They're probably dead no matter what if the food falls off, actually. It's not going to be saved by whether the architecture is timeless. But this was fun to do because everybody's been doing pizzerias now that are all crunchy and, you know, organic and, you know, I mean, the project I just showed you before this was that. I'm like tired of it. So it was good to just say, okay, we're not doing that anymore. Let's do this. Here it is. And, you know, I think this is kind of the way to do something in a mall. I think it's actually, you know, based on the concept, I kind of believe in it. Then getting into heavy-duty branding, this is a project we did in LA. We did two of these, one in New York and one in LA. This is called Go Burger. And these guys said, hey, we want 3 burger restaurants. We're going to build 3 at once. We only ended up building 2. One of them, their lease went dead on. But this is on the corner of Sunset and Vine. And it's a New York company called BLT Steak, and they wanted to roll out a burger chain. So so we kind of said they wanted it to be a little sporty. They didn't want a sports bar. They wanted a lot of TVs. They wanted sports to be playing. And we looked at a lot of burger places, and there's kind of a DNA of diner in them, it seems like. And it's also kind of a nice way to be casual and I think a little bit familiar to the people. So we thought about that, and then but we felt like it needed something signature that said something about them, and also that could be repeated in other places because we're creating 2 of these and hopefully many more. So we came up with this ceiling, which is basically just a wallpaper that talks about food, and then that also became part of the signage, and we used it in all the branding, and that's us picking finishes and stuff. And then here it is built out. You can see, you know, kind of matches the drawings. Here it is. It's not this shiny in the photograph. It kind of looks a lot glossier for some reason. But here is the place. And, you know, it's a little bit diner. We've got Pullman booths, but they're more sporty to tie into the sport thing. And spatially, we played around with high and low areas. And, again, intimacy within a big spot. Pretty fun. And, you know, it's LA, too. Here's the one in New York. It's a long, narrow space versus a square corner. There's that ceiling again. And we're mixing that with warm woods. In this case, it's white oak and walnut. And this one spills out onto the sidewalk. It has a big roll-up garage door. And again, these kind of finishes. Usually these projects, we have a graphic designer from their end. It's sometimes even a brand expert that's driving certain things. So, to me, you know, restaurants they can be pretty artistic, but they are commerce. It's hard to get away from that. But when you slow down and you do somebody's home, I think, you know, you can pretend you're a true artist. And maybe if you're lucky, you can be. But, you know, it's where architecture gets to become art more than anything. And what's nice about houses, too, is your efforts are mostly put towards design and what you're going to see. When we're designing restaurants, our efforts are battling the size of an air pipe and the building department on a health code. It's just like all of your energy is dealing with stuff like that. Whereas houses, the rules are pretty slack. So this is a house I did in 1991, right before I did Lulu. And I did this while I was in grad school. I was very lucky. I had this client that just kind of materialized and wanted to do this house in Belvedere. And I was really young. I built a lot of houses when I was in college and a few years after that, so I've always known how to build. And I designed enough, so me going slow by myself, I was usually pretty capable, and we had a good contractor and all this, so created this pretty cool house up at the top of Belvedere. It looks out over the bay, and very cool client, older guy and his wife, very into just minimal architecture. They didn't have any sophisticated history of knowledge of architecture. It was kind of this their thing. I would show them pictures of the Barcelona Pavilion and of Villa Savoye and get them like oriented and tied into things that I was talking about, which helped. But this was just this white, whoops, that's the next one, white, clean pavilion up on a hill. It was really fun. And like this deck on the lower left, that's about 40 feet off the ground. That's way up there. And the railing is all in steel, painted with car paint, and then polished weekly with automotive paint. And I went to this house about a year ago, and it's in perfect condition. It was really bizarre. They've upkept it perfectly, and you guys are probably all too young to experience visiting a building you did 20 years ago, but it's bizarre. It's like, wow, look at that like doggy gate, that latch I designed, it still works. I mean, you can find these things, it's cool. Anyhow, so then this is a condominium in San Francisco for a client up on Russian Hill. And this is, this is like kind of a lot of the projects we're doing right now, where somebody will come to us, they'll have a floor of a condominium or a tower, and they'll gut it, and we'll put a whole new thing in there, architecture, furniture, everything. And for her, she also had a really complicated art and photography collection that we had to deal with. And it was fun, but it was also, I'm not sure she bought the right place to do that, because a lot of it is color photography, which is light sensitive. But she bought basically a glass box. So this is the two sides. And so what I did is I said, let's kind of make two things in one, even though it's not that obvious when you're in there. And so one part of it is much more where you come through in like a gallery where the light doesn't reach in so far. And that's where much more of the art is. Let me see. That's in these areas. And then as you get out into the open areas, it becomes more of this. And what I learned on this project, and I've done ever since, is when you're working on these projects in houses that have these incredible views, it's very easy to just start getting lazy about the architecture, because you just go, well, I just got to get everything aimed at the view, and it's okay, this can just be simple and white because there's the view and whatever. It's just, and if you do that, if the place will be pretty mono, it'll just be view. It's kind of like the epic without the detail story. So I said, you know what, I'm going to make sure that anytime you spin around and have your back to the view, you've got something as good, if not better. I was like, I'm going to compete with the view. And in the end, that's just what I do on these projects now. I don't let the view like make it easy for me anymore. So these are some of the parts that you look back on. I think it's hard to say that this is better than the view. I'm not trying to really totally compete, but I'm trying to create some kind of an equality. Here's a house in Sonoma that I did, very low budget. This was built for $200 a square foot. And I convinced the owner, she had this really nice piece of land and she wanted to renovate her house, like put a kitchen and add a bedroom and this and that. And it was going to cost about $250,000. And I convinced her if she could up her budget to $400,000, which is a good way to get fired, that maybe she could have a new house that would have 10-foot ceilings and be on the right part of her 5-acre walnut orchard, which was beautiful. And she was up for it, but she just didn't know how to get that money. So I helped her. She had a barn back in the back corner. She had a fixed income. So she couldn't really refinance for more money, but interest rates were coming down, and I'm always playing around with buying and selling houses, so I know about that stuff. So I said, you should rent out that barn, like find somebody that wants to use it for storage so you can rent it legally, not as somebody for living, but for whatever. And so she's like, okay. She got $1,000 a month for that. At that point in time, if you went to a bank, you could get about $150,000 to $200,000 in mortgage money that would be covered by $1,000 a month on this rent that she was getting. So that was really free money for her. It didn't change her monthly income or anything. And she said, well, how do I do that? So I kind of took her through it, and she did it, and she came back, she was like, I have 400 grand, but I want a pool. I was like, well, then you need like 470. So she figured out how to find another 70. But I said, listen, and this is another good way to get fired, I'm going to design things really down and dirty and simple to the level that you're not going to like them, but you got to trust me that when it's built, you'll like it. I mean, I don't know, sometimes you can talk to clients some ways and other times you can't, but it was like I was like handshake, and I was also, look, I was like, my fee is going to be small on this too, so I don't have time to like putz around and mess with little things, but you got to trust me. So she's like, well, can I have a fireplace? I was like, no, it can only be a gas one. She's like, all right, fine, and then she's like, well, can I have an outdoor shower? I was like, okay, yeah, it was like bartering what she could have and not, but it was always fun. So we created this. It's a 100-foot long by 20-foot wide house. It's 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. Her son's bathroom is the one, if you're just over for dinner, you use it also. And it's a long bar, and I've created a lot of these bar-shaped houses over the years, actually. This one's the simplest one. But what I said is, I said, look, this is going to be a really boring building, and if I just do this, it's going to look like a trailer in your field. So I want to put this roof on top of it to create a little bit of a tie back to the agricultural buildings of the area, to create outdoor shade space, and to create a counterpoint between the two. She's like, all right, whatever, that sounds crazy. So that's what we did. And we built it for $200 a foot. It stayed right on budget. It's built out of SIPs, which are structural insulated panels. It's all white inside. It's all painted cabinetry, but it's got 10-foot ceilings, 8-foot high doors and windows. It's got the fundamentals. It doesn't really need anything more. It's got pre-finished floors. Let me back up. And she loves it. And it doesn't look like a cheap house at all. Everybody's coming down her driveway going, what is that? I love that. It's great. So that was a definite aberration, probably, on the way we get to do projects. This is one out in Stinson, which is a ground-up building on the lagoon in the neighborhood of Seadrift. I don't know if you guys know the areas out there, but this is a really cool little spot. Some houses are on the ocean and some are on the lagoon. They're on this spit of land, and this is one that happens to be on the lagoon. The sites are very small. We were allowed only a 1,900 square foot home, and with the FEMA rules, you have to build the houses pretty high above the ground now for the future rising tides. And it turns out that level is about 3 feet above the sand, the normal, like where you would put your yard, and about 8 feet above the lagoon, because the lagoon's down lower. So if you really want to use your outdoor space out there, you have to just build decks everywhere. So this whole property, except for right here, is either house or deck, the whole thing. But it's a small piece of property, so you're not building a lot. And so then we're scratching our heads going, we're really kind of just building a pier and putting a building on it. And it wasn't built like that, but that's the way we ended up approaching it. So anywhere you look, you're just kind of like on this pier deck with a pavilion on it. So this is the side that then leads down to the water. It's kind of cool. There's a little boat garage here that everybody slides in their kayaks. It's very recreational. The house opens up. You can see right through it. It's got this kind of pinch point here. Bedrooms on one side, common space, little family room, outdoor to the water, outdoor to the sun. Did this fire orb. This was the second time I used one. The ones I used in that restaurant were fuel powered. These are wood burning. And this one also rotates 180 degrees. So it can aim indoors or outdoors. It's kind of funny. I want to see something. Everything looks weird from over here. Here it is again. And here we're doing pretty much everything. A lot of what we do in these houses you would consider interiors, but it's also just built, like all these cabinets and things. This is just millwork, and it's designed specifically to have a custom sofa built right in here. we sized and designed the sofa. There was an interior designer on board who actually selected the fabric, who had worked with the owner before. This is a kitchen idea I've come up with where you put mirrors in the upper cabinets, so when you're working in the kitchen you can still see the view or your face, either way. Let me back up too. This is, here's something else I really like to do. I like to bring in light along walls, edges like that, and then just wash areas. I always like light being indirect in most cases.
Is that a skylight or light?
Yeah, that's a skylight. It's a long, long skylight above there with a structure that just goes through, and then it's wrapped with sheetrock, so it kind of baffles the light. This is a ground-up house I did in Buena Vista Terrace. This is the first time I used this thing. I got to stop using these. It's getting a little out of hand. It's not me. My clients keep asking for it. But this was a ground-up urban infill. Tore down a little house and put this one in. And this was really fun to do. German bachelor, no requirements, almost anti-requirements. Like, do you want a refrigerator? Why would I need that? Kind of. How about a one-burner stove? Sure you don't want one under-counter refrigerator? Okay, those were the debates. It was fun. So, anyhow, it's very simple. But one of the things about this was I worked really hard on the facade because I was between this building and this one to the right over here. And they're really, they're historic-ish, but very detailed. I mean, these aren't, I kind of like the one on the right. I'm not so much into this one, but they're definitely very detailed buildings. And you can't put bland between extreme. It just, to me, it doesn't work. It's got to have some degree of interest, but you don't have to be historic. So, we have deep set windows. We have this slatted wood thing that has actually more texture than even the shingles. We've got a deep set shady part. We've got a cornice. Behind this tree, we've got a vertical element. When you step back and you look at some of these buildings, they have all those pieces. So we used sort of a guideline pattern to do that. The entry, you go in and you hang a right, so there's no door facing the front. And then inside, the main floor, when you go upstairs, when you come in, you go up the staircase, and then it's just one room up here. And the kitchen is the island, and it becomes the dining room at this end, so it's all stainless steel. It does have a little fridge in there, and then it becomes the table here. And then when you look the other way, that's what leads to this, and you've got Coal Valley, and then the sunset and the ocean out there eventually. The reason I used the fire pit here wasn't just because it was such a cool thing. It was because it's kind of like the perfect foreground for a view. You can orient a room to the view and the fire without the fireplace being massive and clogging up your view. Built-in sofa again, these private little retreat things. Something else I should have mentioned too, that these restaurants are always so public, and then the houses are just so private, and it's great going back and forth with those. Here's a house up in the Sierras. This is off the grid completely, no utility connection whatsoever. And it's a two-building scheme. There's a live building and a sleep building. There's an outdoor lawn, and then the space to this outdoor space, which is here, and then there's a big view there. It's kind of neat, though, because there's not really any view here, so the main outdoor space is very insular, facing a hill. And then the bold outdoor space is really more of a vista point as far as the view goes. It's only really they use this a little bit in the winter on the way to skiing. It's in the Sierra foothills, so you go here and you might drive another hour in the morning up to like Bear Valley to go skiing. And then they'll spend a week or two here in the summer periodically. Family of 4, and so there's 4 little bedrooms, a little breezeway right through this building, very dense with function, and then just a cook, eat, live pavilion there. IKEA furniture. I mean, it's funny. These guys have a lot of money, but to them, they wanted this weird challenge of having all the cheapest stuff in the world, which it's fun to play with. I still scratch my head, but whatever. And here you can see the stuff. A lot of this is designed to have vines growing all up in it. This is right after it was done, but you can kind of get a sense of it. Here's a family home in Los Altos Hills. This is a cool house in a lot of ways. 2 breezeways, sort of 3 buildings, main house, pool house, garage. The swimming pool's actually over here. So this little gap here is right there. And what happens is this becomes like the positive outdoor space that has some shade, but then this gives you a view back out to Silicon Valley. So my back in this photo would be to Silicon Valley. Here it is. It's in a former apricot orchard, which is mostly what Los Altos Hills is. And we designed it as 2 things. It's a lower building, which is the plaster, which is this part, and then the upper building, which touches the ground here, is the wood. Inside, very clean, a little bit like that house in Sonoma with the roof, sheetrock, 10-foot ceilings, 8-foot doors, mix of wood and sheetrock. Keep it clean, but to keep it warm. This outdoor shady space. Then here's another one I did. This is a retreat house. This is in Aptos. And so you go down to Santa Cruz and you go up about 10 miles into the woods, up into the redwood forest. But when you look out, you see the ocean. It's really a great place. And this is for like a San Francisco family. It's a Brady Bunch type family. They have a lot of kids. They are at all ages, so they really wanted this place to recreate, slumber party, and they had never had one of these before, and there was a lot of debate while we were designing, like how would they use it, but boy, do they use it. It's great. So it's 2 buildings. There's actually a third I'll show you, but this is, I'm always playing around now with things over other things, and is it 2 buildings or 1, and breezeways, and so here, instead of like a roof over a building, or 2 buildings with a breezeway, I said, what if we slide 1 building under the other building? It's a different way to do it. And to me, that was also because they really wanted a traditional barn-looking house. They wanted peaked roofs and all this, and I just couldn't figure out a way to swallow too traditional of a building. So this is where I wrestled with it and made it into something different. And then on sort of more mundane things, it just opens up completely. That's the main space. That's the kitchen, living, dining. These are bunk rooms. There's a bathhouse, and then there's like a master suite up here. They cheated. They were like, yeah, we need 1 bath. I was like, great. And then we got going. They're like, well, we don't want to go downstairs to the bath. I'm like, all right. So you guys are, So here it is, opened up. These are looking out towards the view. The kitchen was fun, big long island, and it's made out of a whole large walnut slab. This whole piece of the house is made out of wood, the interior. It's hard to, I find it, I can use sheetrock in the country. Obviously I can use it, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's funny, you do these rural houses and you sort of don't want to use sheetrock. It feels like you should just use other materials, stone and wood, or if it's sheetrock, paint it dark. The bedrooms where we didn't want to spend money, we did in sheetrock, but all the common areas are concrete, steel, wood, more natural. Actually, let me back up. So here you can see the floor plan. Here's the main part. And I just said, let's put the kitchen in the middle. Let's not like dance around the issue. Let's make the kitchen the middle of the house. This is a party house. Put it in the middle. And so that's what it is. And then here's a bathhouse. This has double bathrooms in it. And then 2 bedrooms here. These have sleeping lofts. And then you go upstairs, and it's the master suite up there. This is their separate building, which we did. It's a pre-engineered metal barn. And we also built a mezzanine like loft inside of it, and that allows even more kids to sleep, and they play pool here and ping pong downstairs. This is all made out of Core-10. The house has a Core-10 roof with a used barnwood. He surfs a lot, so that's kind of why they ended up in that location. This is a house I recently did in Palo Alto. This was a really unique project. These people, let me back up. The lower part of this house is all made out of rammed earth. This upper part, which essentially floats with this anti-gravity machine I found, is all wood, and it's really a play between those two. So this is the whole lower part, you can see up here, and this is the upper. Here's kind of a view, and there again, this is a breezeway you come through into a courtyard. From that, you go into the main house or into the garage or the studio. And this is right in downtown Palo Alto. This is like a busy corner, not really busy, but residential. We didn't think we'd be able to get this approved, but it went through pretty easily. So you can see, then the inside is kind of a combination of natural wood, sheetrock, and rammed earth. Here's all the rammed earth. And the rammed earth was made from the dirt on the site. We excavated the foundation dirt and built it. We used a guy named David Easton. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's amazing. Built these beautiful forms and did all this great work. Here you can start to see, where's that mouse? Sorry. Yeah, here we are. Right here, that's some of the rammed earth on the inside. Again, here versus the wood. Again, here. Here you can see more of the outside. And then in New York, a loft similar to some of these other urban condos. Not really a loft, but condo. This is my place in New York. And gutted 2 condominiums and merged them together and just kind of created a minimalist, clean retreat. It's got great views. It's up high. It's really just about I'm just trying to, here it's 1,600 square feet. I'm trying to make it as big as I possibly could in every way. I wasn't playing really any tricks with myself. I just wanted it as large as possible. Nice details and as large as possible. A little more residential. This is urban infill project we did. This is what used to be Azi restaurant right next door to Lulu. You can see Lulu here. So we renovated this many years ago into a restaurant. At the same time, we built 10 live-work lofts on top. So this was really unique and fun. We worked hard on a restaurant while we did all this work on top. This is a diagram of what we had. This got renovated. This is what got built. Here it is in cross-section. Here's what the restaurant was. This restaurant never really made it. I'm not completely sure why. But now it's 00, that pizza place. Here's the unit plans. Here's the units themselves. And then pretty quickly, I'll just take you through some work projects. So this is Michael Osborne Design. This is a graphic design office we did here in San Francisco. And he just moved. He had this office for 15 years like this. This is a 15-year-old picture. And we just did a new one for him over here on 111 Rhode Island. It was pretty neat. His lease expired, but he loved this space. But in this one, it was a little bit about creating a piazza inside of a warehouse. And this is one of those guys that came to me and said, I've been eating lunch at Lulu. I want my office to look like that. And so it's hard to see, but there's a fireplace down here, and some of the colors are similar. And I deployed this piazza idea where I said, let's make all your designers in this hub, and then we'll surround it with kind of, ancillary buildings. Then we were doing .com projects. This is a very large one. This is on 2nd Street, where now Chronicle Books bought the building. But this is when we did the building for a company called InnoVenturi. This for 300 people. It was 50,000 square feet, the whole building. We cut holes in the floors, put stairways in, built out offices like crazy, had a lot of fun. It used to be a dry dock building, so it had this huge space in the front. This was new. We built a server room out here. Chronicle took this out. I think that was kind of crazy, but whatever. And it was sad, one of these things where they moved in and within 3 months it was empty. But it was a fun building. These are the old dry dock doors that are still part of the building. It's pretty fun. Since we do work in New York too, this is an Ammirati agency. We just did their advertising agency in downtown. And this guy's, he's a friend of mine now, and he's just really into minimalist white aesthetics. And what? Oh, hey. Louder? And so we just created this place. It's all USM Haller, which is a metal furniture line that's really cool and kind of expensive. And then this is some of the other rooms. Whoops. I don't know what that is. Sorry. Kill it. Here's some of this core and shell work we do. Can you guys hear me? Is that okay? Okay. This is something like we didn't do the interior on at all. This is just a facade and seismic work. This is on Mission Street between 3rd and 2nd. These are fun too. Doing interiors is great, but it's a lot of work, and every now and then it's nice just to do some bang-up architecture and walk away from it. This is probably one of the most brand-oriented projects we ever did, which is Tesla. We did their showroom in LA, the flagship, the first one ever, and the one that they've based all the other subsequent ones from. So this used to be 2 buildings. Actually, yeah, there's not a picture of that. This was 2 warehouses we put together. I think that was the line. And completely gutted this place. It was almost gone when we started the renovation. And then created a brand and an interior for them to sell cars in. All they had is cars and a website at that point. They didn't know what architecture should look like to sell it in. We didn't either, but we all worked carefully. But there were some things they knew. One was they wanted a showroom, and they wanted a service center, and they wanted them connected. So from the street, you can see them both, and then when you're in either one of these, they're connected through them. So what we did is we created this core that's kind of a mix of function and transparency and connections, and that links what we considered a gallery for the cars, not really a showroom, and a service center. Here's like a lot of the sketches from the early days, and then here's what we built. And it was a nice old building. It's nice to try to sell or to put luxury objects like cars in more of a gallery setting than in more of a setting that's more of the same. If you look at most car, it's funny, I learned a lot. You look at most car showrooms, you'll see BMWs or Mercedes, and you'll see them, and they'll be in a glass and metal room. And it's like, that's kind of boring. But if you look at print ads for cars, that's where you learn it. The cars are on like the edges of cliffs and on dirt roads and in front of beaches and fields or in front of old brick walls. And that was what we clinged on to. This is all the colors the car comes in. We created this, Donald Judd did things similar to this, and I showed them images of how that could be, and that was tied into that. Here's a little more of it. We put blue light in here because to me kind of blue light represented electricity. Here's the showroom. We worked with them. We took a lot of their production photographs of engineering and production, and we made murals out of those. Here's their little conference room, some of their screenshots from when they're building cars. That's it. Thanks. I'm tired.
Are there any questions for Chaz?
I'm not that tired. You can ask them. Yeah.
How do you formulate a budget on these restaurant projects, and how good are you keeping control of that and staying on budget?
That's like a client question. Usually what we do is in the beginning, and it's how we sort of derive our fees. Usually we do it by the square foot based on, if it's a gut renovation, we'll use like 300 or 400 a square foot. And it's funny, sometimes we'll share that with a client, but sometimes you get fired or you don't get hired if you show them that because they just think it's so much money, and if you're already assuming it's that, whoops, you're not going to be like responsible with their money or something. But generally it's by the square foot. But what we like to do for the whole process is we start off with that, then at the end of schematic design, we'll go out and we'll get some preliminary pricing. Once we've got enough scope and there's some architecture and some MEP and this and that, and we'll get 3 or 4 contractors. With that, put it together and say, okay, here's where we are. And it's usually one of those things like they've either got to go raise more money, or the budget is correct, or we'll have to scale back the project, or something else. Sometimes they go back to the landlord for more money. And then we use that, though I must say that becomes the number we have to live with. And so if we get pricing further down the road when we go out for bids, then we're usually, if it goes up, we got to come back and do value engineering and figure out what to take out of the project. You do, on the restaurant, you have these pretty interesting debates about it, though, because everybody thinks that like the fancy architecture drives the budget, and if the architects just didn't specify such expensive finishes or as many light fixtures, it would be a lot cheaper. But it's really not true on restaurants. What drives the budget on restaurants is the size of the kitchen, by far. And because not only does the kitchen equipment cost something, but every piece has a pipe and a wire. And if it's a hot piece, it has a length of hood, and then the length of hood has air that comes out, and so it really multiplies back there. And you say, okay, well, we can go from stone counters to Formica in your bar and save 0.002% on the budget, and everybody will see it. But usually, it's kind of a combination of value engineering. Yeah.
Here's a contractor question to go with the client question. How did you get that house on Palo Alto to cantilever on the clear story at the Fulcrum?
That's that anti-gravity machine I told you.
Yeah.
Actually, there's some steel columns back in there. They go right into they come right out of the rammed earth. They're in there, and the glass is out in front of them. And the way that photograph was trickily taken, you can't see them, but they're in there. Yeah. But there's not very many steel columns for that building. Actually, it's a little. When you look around at how many points of support there are, it's pretty few. Yeah. Yeah. What are you doing here? Yeah.
In restaurants, you say that you can dampen the sound with some of the structures in the ceiling. Is there an optimum sound that you want? Because you don't want it to be too quiet, but I guess you don't want it to be too loud. So can you adjust that?
You know, you can't. I don't think you can make a restaurant too quiet. You could. I think you could probably do all the soundproofing absorption possible, and I doubt anybody would find it too quiet. It's very hard to control because when you put like more than 50 people in a room, and a lot of the time it's 100 people, no matter how much sound absorption you put in, it's still going to be too noisy. What I find is that you try to do two things, though. You try to absorb as much sound as you can, but if you're really lucky, you can change the pitch of the sound from high frequency to low. And low is a lot easier to be around than high. But when you have an open kitchen, this is something we fight with open kitchens, they're very high frequency type noise. You got clanking and pots and pans and air noise hissing. And so you usually put as much as you can in. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For a restaurant, let's say your client has a really generous budget. Have you found that over the years that the more quality that you put into the architecture and also the more quality that is in the food itself is proportional to the longevity of the
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. It's a good question. You know, it's like, is it worth investing appropriately? And I think so. I mean, I think probably the most effective is really the ideas, whether it's a food concept or just the general architecture. But the more it's done well, and usually it takes money to do things well, the better it is, the longer it'll last, and I think the more you'll feel it. I think so. I mean, it's like totally for sure in food. You know, high quality food is not going to be cheap, but it will be better. It'll probably last longer. You know, it's fresher to begin with, so it'll last longer, and it tastes better. And I think customers, especially, I mean, all of us in San Francisco are so discerning, and we're not cheap. I think most people are fine with paying a little more for a little bit of quality. I think where it gets you into trouble, and I don't know where that would be, but if people can't perceive the value in that, then it's not going to be worth it. But if it's seen and perceived, and that takes people at both sides of the spectrum to get that. Mm-hmm.
You're obviously having a lot of fun working with the clients and doing these creative projects.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage to keep involved in the creative part of running two firms with 20 people on two coasts, where you've got to keep sales coming in to keep everyone busy?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I tell you, I work really hard. I'm pretty thankful that I have a lot of stamina. I can work really, really hard, more than most people have ever encountered. You know, I think mostly what I do is I kind of keep telling myself it's like some big, crazy adventure, and I don't try to draw a line between I'm doing one thing or another, or it's work versus personal life, or it's budget versus creative or design. I just kind of do it all at once, and hopefully the average feels right. It does get complicated with clients, though, because they want you, and they think, oh, you know, you get these things like, oh, you're off in New York, you must be partying. I'm like, yeah, I wish, but, you know, I'm like, I'm working just as hard there with other clients. So, and you know, you do get spread thin. You know, there's only so much people can do. But you know, I got to say, my staff is really good. I have a long-term group of people that I work with. I have a senior architect in San Francisco and one here, and then 3 interiors people, and it's good. You know, the longer we've worked together, the more efficient we are, and the better we are at it. And I think we have more and more repeat clients all the time too, and that makes it easy. You know, but it's gotta go fast. You know, it's scary too. You know, you got like a couple $100,000 of overhead a month. You got to make sure you're billing in front of, and it's a rat race. Yeah, got to learn how to, you know, not sleep much. Like today, for instance, you know, I was out late in New York City last night. I caught a 6:30 a.m. flight for a 10:30 a.m. meeting in LA, and then I had a 5 o'clock meeting here, and then I fly the red-eye to New York tonight because I have an 11 a.m. meeting in New York City. Now that's a little rare, but that still happens, you know, more than I want. And so what do? I just got to go, fuck it, it's an adventure, go for it, right? Make sure you sleep on the plane. I mean, you can't hold back. Mm-hmm.
As a student in the academy, there's quite a separation between architecture and interiors. And I was wondering if in the streets, in the profession, if you see them as one or as vastly different things that converge once in a while, especially in your projects.
You know, in my office, we don't really see it or think of it separately much, fortunately. But you see every version of whether it's pushed together or separate out there. What you see in the restaurant business, actually, is there are a lot of clients and projects done where they hire 2 separate firms, literally. There'll be an architect of record and there'll be an interior designer. Frequently, the interior designers are hired first. They're usually connected to the owner in some kind of, they're friends or they've worked together, and then they decide that they're going to put a restaurant in Miami, so they look for an architect of record who will handle the heavy lifting, and then the design team will stay the interiors. But I think, you know, the clients, the good clients, they see that as it's better when it's seamless. And I work with some consultants too. It's kind of neat when you do restaurants for a long time, that you find all these different specialists in the industry, and there's these restaurant consultants that get hired, and it's not like it's literally their job to bring architects and chefs and all these people together, but they end up doing that. It's like that project I got hired for in South Africa, and this friend of mine helps these guys analyze what to do with their property from restaurants in the food side, you know, and he's like, look, you need a good architect to do this, you need a chef to do that. And when he brings me on projects, what he likes, he's like, because he's used to a lot of them in Vegas where there's always a designer and an architect, and they fight, they point fingers, the projects get stalled. I mean, it's not how good it turns out, it's like there's turmoil. So he's like, you gotta use CCS, man, it's one-stop shopping, they don't fight with themselves. So I'm like, great. We do. Yeah, in the back.
Sound really, is it really luck when you get that frequency change? Like, what are ways you tried to do that?
You know, I just think, I don't know how you control it, but I think if you don't put any sound absorption in, it's probably going to be high-pitched. And if you put some in, I think it'll trap some of the high-pitched sound, and you'll only end up with the lower-pitched. Lulu is a weird example. You know, I've always gone back to Lulu for many lessons, but Lulu is a really noisy restaurant, but it's drummy, it's deep, loud, and it's not so hard to be in that, or it used to not be. I think it is now. But whereas other projects, I swear, are not as loud, but they're hard. And you know what the worst is when the pitch of the sound is about at the same pitch as your voice. I don't know what hertz that is. Call it 120. I don't know enough about sound frequencies, but man, you could be in a pretty quiet room and the frequency is the same as your voice, and you can't hear anything. But I don't know. I kind of have it's probably more my theory than my science about how that stuff works. Black foam on the ceiling, low frequency. Yeah.
What haven't you done that you're looking forward to doing?
Well, you know, I really want to do more ground-up buildings. You know, even though I like doing interiors, you can probably tell when I'm like going through doing these houses, these ground-up things. I mean, they're a little different. So you know, I want to do a variety of things, larger scale, and more ground up. And I'd like to do things that are more complex programmatically. I mean, like restaurants are very complex, but there's like a whole bunch of micro things that they're complex about. They're, you know, but you know, like doing, you know, urban infill, mixed use, or cultural buildings that are mixed use. Certainly anything, art building, museums, and this and that would be great to do. I think the projects that are even more public too, you get addicted to bringing people together. You know, restaurants are weird. You know, like I was saying, they're sort of private. I think they're kind of public. But if you think about the quantity of people that go in and sit in a restaurant over a year, it's much larger than probably just about anything else. Maybe museums are a little larger. I don't know what else. But where do people like congregate more anywhere than in like in a medium-sized restaurant? I mean, Lulu's probably had 10 million people through there. Mm-hmm.
It seems like the barbecue place that you guys made was made out of cheap material, plywood, and things like that. That kind of goes against your answer to this other question where you think it's really important to put high quality materials in there.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's an example where it totally goes the other way. Yeah, I think, you know, not all rules seem to hold, but most of the time, high quality, more expensive things, I think, will go there. I think what it reminded me of, though, what you just said, is where you need to be careful when you're spending more money to get what you think is higher quality is if you push yourself out of like the formal versus casual category that you want to be in, then it's counterproductive. Because if you started out thinking, okay, the interior needs to be plywood and funky, and then you go, whoa, well, we can get walnut paneling for the same price, or maybe a little more, isn't that better? Well, better is like, what's better? Yeah, it's a better product, and people might think it's a nicer material, but all of a sudden you went from casual to formal. Whereas when we went from plywood to used barnwood, we kept it in the same casual bucket. It's an important thing that I am always reminding myself and my staff about, this sort of the casual scale. Somewhere I have a slide of it where it's like, you know, it goes 0 to 10, and there's like casual to formal. It's like the C to the F. It's like, you know, a little joke thing. But what the human brain likes to do wrong, you always got to be watching out for good intentions that go awry. But it's that kind of thing when you start to spend more money and up things, it's very easy to lose track of what your intent with it was. And especially in architecture, you know, you see it all the time. Oh, it's better, and then it's like it drifted out of the vibe and the feel that you wanted to. And I don't know why it's hard to keep track of that. I don't know. It's like one of those blinding design process things. It's like I think our brains are not. They go binary. They're like quality, and then they go, well, what is it later? So, I know when I teach classes a little bit, I'm always harping on that subject quite a bit. And I do it with clients too, because clients don't see, they're like, wow, you know, look at this chair, it's got arms, isn't that cool? I'm like, yeah, but not for a cafe, come on, that's a casual cafe, what are you talking? I mean, I'm sort of exaggerating, but that's the way it goes. Same thing they want to do, I mean, I've seen this, we did a high-end restaurant, high-end menu in Portland. The guy wanted to use wooden seats without upholstery. And you know, I love wooden seat chairs, they're great. But if you're trying to do a high-end seafood restaurant and have chairs like that, you've got a casual, formal disconnect. That's an easy one to see. But he didn't see it that way. He was just like, oh, I'm not going to spend more than $120 on that chair. I was like, okay, you know, not the. That's where money should have been spent. That's a good example. Mm-hmm.
Did you go straight from your bachelor degree into the master's program, or did you work in between, or what was kind of your progression?
Yeah, thanks. I worked for 5 years. What I did is I went through undergraduate school as a carpenter, put myself through college like being a weekend and summer carpenter. And by the time I finished undergraduate school at Berkeley, I had a lot of clients already from, like, I had been building fences and little kitchen remodels, and they had, you know, there were more of them, and some were saved larger projects. That was a great deal. You know, I could draw plans, get a building permit, and build it, and I was cheap. I thought I was expensive, but I was cheap. And my friends were all going to work in firms. There wasn't much work then. It was the early 80s, and people were getting like drafting jobs at SOM, and it was pretty low pay, and nobody was having fun. And I just had this opportunity, and then so I went and I got my contractor's license so I could do it legitimately. In most places, you don't need to be an architect to design houses and remodels, so I just did that. And I had clients on the peninsula mostly, Woodside, Portola Valley. And so I did that for 5 years, and it got big. It was design build, and it got really big, but it wasn't becoming more architecture. So like 4 years into it, I said, I made some money, I've done a lot, I've learned something, certainly learned a lot about running a business, but I really want to be an architect. And so I gave everybody 1 year's notice, clients, staff, everybody, and I went back and got my architecture degree. But you know what, the clients never went away. It was the same clients, I just wasn't building for them. And that's how I got that house in Belvedere. And then by the time I finished, then I was just practicing architecture only and same clients, and it just never really stopped. Mm-hmm.
So if you're a contractor, you have an inside perspective on the people who are building what you're doing. What's the biggest mistake you see contractors make?
Being in business? Fighting with architects? Let's see. Waking up in the morning? I don't know, I hate contractors. The biggest mistake, I guess, there's a few. First of all, like, I mean, it's sad, you know, we are in the construction business, all of us. You know, we are the designers, but we are part of the industry, and we are hugely pushed around by it. We don't push it around, it pushes us around. So I don't love that fact, but it's the truth. But most of the industry is very lacking in real experience. There's a lot of contracting, and there's not a lot of building. So it's kind of, you know, it's weird. You know, when you meet like a sheet metal guy that's really into doing good sheet metal, or you meet a carpenter, it's like, what an exception. Why is that an exception? I mean, God, those guys that's their profession. It should be the other way around. And it's great, you know, and when I meet those guys and they meet me, you know, we're like high five, you know, oh, you used to be the carpenter, oh, cool, whatever. So that's my general complaint. But the biggest problem I see that they make today is they draw a line in the sand between them and the owner and the contract and the architect. They put the architect and the owner typically on the other side of the line from them. And on their side, they defend the subcontractors. I don't get it. Their subcontractors aren't the ones that are going to give them jobs in the future. They're never a potential client. It's just the wrong place to draw that line in the sand. They should at least draw it between me and the owner, which, well, they try to do that too, but I just see them all the time, and I pull them on the side and go, you're standing here, you're spending 10 minutes explaining to the owner why your painter and your roofer should get all this money. I think you should spend 10 minutes talking to your painter and your roofer why they're not going to get the money, and you should tell the owner how well you did that. They just don't see that line in the sand, and they just blow it over and over and over again. You know, it's not like they have to be magicians and succeed with that, but they sure could change their perspective. It's too bad, you know. And you know, it's like, what's the value they're adding to the project? It's too bad. And some, you know, I know it's hard to build, you know, and the budgets are tight. You know, it's easy to criticize them and then not expect them to perform. But I just think a lot of the time the perspective isn't quite right to start off with. We good?
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.